This is Katinka.
And this is Simone. And you are listening to the Novotech podcast.
We are recording this podcast in March 2021. It's been 1 year since we started working from home due to the COVID-19 pandemic. During the last year, virtualization and accelerated digital transformation brought major changes to how organizations operate, work, and deliver value to their customers. We are excited to host our first panel discussion with Yun Zhi Lin, partner of Deloitte Platform Engineering, and Craig Cauchi, partner development specialist in data and analytics at AWS. With our guests, we look back at the last 1 year and summarize our learnings, the good and the bad. We will also hear a few tips on how to keep up and how to strive in this climate in the coming years.
Hello, and welcome back to the podcast. Very excited to have our first panel discussion today, a retrospective of last year's accelerated digital transformation, lessons learned, and the future of the tech workplace. So, our first guest is Yun Zhi Lin. Yun is a pioneering leader in cloud-enabled digital transformation. As a partner of Deloitte Platform Engineering, Yun co-leads 500 plus engineers in tackling weak problems and helping incumbent organizations become young again.
And our second guest is Craig Cauchi. Craig is currently a partner development specialist in data and analytics at AWS. He's the founder of Forefront Analytics and has previously served in the role of the data practice director at Contino APAC. Over the last decades, he's implemented numerous data and analytics projects, leading teams of data scientists, data engineers, and the like. Let's get started.
The pandemic has accelerated digital transformation. What were the main changes companies were forced to adopt to survive in this climate? Let's go with Yun first.
Yeah, that's a very good question, Simone. I think before we dive into the whole sort of accelerated digital transformation, it's important for us to take a step back and consider what is the meaning of digital transformation. I think it's digital technology is really all around us. It's pretty much ubiquitous in a way that electricity is ubiquitous, right? We do not do a electricity transformation, so why do we do a digital transformation? I think a lot of times when we talk about digital transformation, it's really different and distinct from what we see around us, which is very much around digitization, right? So digitization is to use modern technology, use digital technology and digital channels to get something done. Whereas digital transformation is really then to take digital technologies and go end to end into the organization and think about the processes, the workflows, the skills that's needed and changing the organization as a whole. So if we take that as our definition of digital transformation and look at how COVID has accelerated the transformation of organizations to become more digitized, more sort of orientated towards digital channels and improving the end-to-end workflow, I think there's actually two aspects that I can see over the last year in 2020. The first one is companies who already have a digital channel, then taking that digital channel and enhancing it and making it more end-to-end and increasing the value stream down to the distribution channels, down to the logistic channels, so that it's no longer about focusing on the digital channel as a point of acquisition, but also completing the entire customer journey into the workflows that govern distribution and logistics and delivery of the actual end product. Because for a lot of companies that have already embarked on the digital transformation journey, that already have sort of very mature digital channels, what happens is the consumer now are isolated. They cannot go to physically pick up goods and they cannot consume services outside their homes. What happens is now these companies who are semi-mature in having the digital acquisition channel, they realize their distribution channel is now cut off. So what they end up doing is enhancing the digital channel, extending that into the distributions and fulfillment of the product. And the other sort of extreme I see is companies who did not actually have a digital channel altogether actually adopting a digital channel, because not only they cannot fulfill their goods, they actually have to acquire customers through a new, I guess, more direct to customer relationship, a more direct digital channel into the actual end consumers instead of relying on an intermediary, which a lot of companies used to do, because prior to COVID, there was a substantial advisor channel or broker channel that used to do a lot of the work for a lot of these sort of large companies. And due to COVID, that entire channel has somewhat diminished, and these companies who are traditionally more B2B or business to business have been forced to adopt a path of going down the B2C route via digital channel. So I think what COVID has really done is accelerated both camps of companies who are not relying on the digital channel to rely on a new digital channel, as well as enhancing the companies that already had a digital channel for acquisition, but then extending it towards the order fulfillment and distribution.
So what were the impacts and what were the changes from the last year, and how are companies needing to adapt to these new conditions? I think taking a simplistic view, a lot of this is dictated by demand, and what we've seen is rapidly changing conditions and demand in flux. So some industries impacted by reduction of demand, and there's some examples of travel industry and flights as airlines are grounded, and then in other industries where there's 10, 20, 100x increase in demand. What it means is organizations need to adapt to be able to respond to these spikes in demand, and taking up digital transformation and moving to the cloud is a key enabler to be able to adapt to these rapidly changing conditions.
So what were the main challenges, you think, of adapting to this new climate, and what are the lessons learned? Craig?
There's probably dozens of examples of all the different challenges that organizations faced, companies like ours and customers, and individually as well in our homes and in lockdown, learning how to adapt. But there's a couple of examples I can call out from some customers. So Intrepid is one customer who sells travel experiences around the world globally. And with this new travel restriction and closure of borders, they had to produce a new product, basically a product around domestic travel. And they're an example of an organization that faced a massive challenge, channels disrupted, demand disrupted, and had to adapt. And they worked closely with the AWS team to develop a new product. I think there was 9 of their employees working together with ours to turn that around in good fashion and get it into the market. That's one example. And another different challenge from a workforce perspective, ANZ Bank is an example, looking for innovative ways to keep their staff engaged and productive during such a disruptive time. They came up with a program called Get Certified in a Week, and they stood up a bunch of infrastructure, videos, and self-learning program to get as many, I think, up to 2,000 staff certified within 5 days. So that was one thing, one of the kind of challenges that they faced and how they kind of innovated to overcome it.
Well, yeah, that sounds like a challenge in itself. What are your thoughts on challenges, Yun?
Yeah, I think just sort of reinforcing Craig's point there previously around this, the disruption of last year, the COVID situation has really meant for a lot of organizations adapting to the sudden spikes in demand, right? And I agree with Craig in that cloud adoption and cloud enablement is really the key factor that underpins true digital transformation. So I won't be able to name companies, but what I can do is give some generic examples in 3 aspects why cloud really matters, and it really helps to drive and help overcome some of the challenges when it comes to digital transformation. So the three key challenges are scalability, resiliency, and innovation. If we think about what was happening last year, if I were to take the example of the company who are transitioning from a traditional B2B sort of broker-based, intermediary-based channel into a modern digital channel, well, first of all, now the uptime, the resiliency needs to be 24/7, right? So typically for a lot of organizations, and you might have seen this when you were shopping online or browsing for groceries online, where you realize that a lot of the digital channels, the website, they could not sort of cope with the load because of the lack of scalability of the existing infrastructure. So by moving into the cloud enables infinite scalability and also gives the reliability and resiliency needed for 24/7 operations, because a digital channel is very much 24/7. Any customers could consume the service anytime they want, as opposed to the traditional channel of 9 to 5. So that scalability and resiliency is very much kind of a given out of the box that becomes a result of cloud adoption. And sort of going beyond the resiliency and the scalability that's needed to transform into a digital, there is also the enablement of the cloud when it comes to innovation. And that's probably one of the hardest challenges to overcome, because a lot of the traditional physical products and goods that were being used to service the customers, well, in a time of isolation, guess what? The product may need to evolve and the product needs to be innovated, but the customer's need hasn't really changed. So if we think about customers who need to buy groceries or they need to go to the gym, well, it's not about going to the gym, it's about the need to get fit. Therefore, a lot of gyms have actually adapted a way of serving the gym members the fitness lessons by going online, right? So that's an example of innovation. And these sort of innovations require brand new ways to think about a company's service and product, and having a cloud enablement program, having the power of cloud. So a company which has adopted the public cloud have at their disposal all the cutting edge technologies, which they do not have to spend time and effort with R&D. So if they were to innovate, they can focus on the business problem at hand and then innovate using the latest technologies which are provided by the cloud vendors. Really, that gives the company a increase in speed to market and be able to fulfill the customers and focus on the customers, and in return get the feedback that they need to then serve the customers even better. So it really comes down to the three challenges of needing to scale, needing to be more resilient, and then having to be able to innovate faster. And having a cloud enablement program really helps enable a digital transformation to overcome all of these three challenges.
Yeah, what's interesting about some of the things you said there, Yun, is around the experience. So the need of the consumer hasn't changed, and these services they're looking to serve the consumer, but the experience has changed dramatically. And what's interesting to me is just, off the top of my head here, thinking like how that experience might change for us if we continue to work remotely. How does this experience of working remotely become more immersive? Going to the gym, for example, maybe it introduces some advancements and innovation around virtual reality, for example. I don't know, but I'm just interested to see where that goes.
Yes, indeed, because at the end of the day, the need to get work done does not equate to the need to go to the office, right? The need to get fit does not equate to the need to go to the gym. And you're 100%, Craig, is all about the experience and how the experience and the services can evolve to meet our needs. And it is very, I'd say this is a very exciting time, and we're probably in some of the most disruptive times in the last few decades, I would say.
Yeah, and like you said, in terms of depending on the industry, like flying or traveling in general, so we are talking about different levels of disruption depending on the industry you are. So just going back to what you said, Craig, working remotely, great, but the real estate industry, there's some news that you have already heard that they are breaking so many different types of breakdown. So companies, especially the large tech ones, are not going back to the office. So some of them have already broke their lease, etc. So the commercial buildings are experimenting some problems of what they're going to do with that building, and if that the situation of working remotely continues in this scale. But what I wanted to ask as well would be, we are talking about the challenges that mostly the companies that had started their transformation before the pandemic, right? But what about the ones that they were behind already before the pandemic? So from your experience, have you seen also some acceleration, might be, I don't know, in having more business case going to the board to, in a quick way, to approve to have that transformation started? Or have you seen the same move in that space compared to the ones that had started before the pandemic, this transformation?
Yeah, it's interesting question. I think it's different for different industries and different organizations. So they're all being disrupted differently, and workforces take, they come in many shapes and sizes. So, one example of a disrupted workforce that is required to innovate under these conditions is call centers. So staff aren't able to physically go to a call center. So you see this emergence in demand for virtual call centers all of a sudden. And there's a big spike, similar to, the spikes in demand we saw earlier, spoke about earlier, sorry. Impacted call centers, that's globally. And then, if you think about smaller organizations and hospitality, for example, massively disrupted, also big challenges in that industry. But we've seen an emergence of new tech, and something that probably was a novelty not so long ago is now become the new normal, for lack of a better term, in terms of like QR codes. I was at a restaurant last night and ordering my drink and my meal via my phone at a restaurant, and it's an experience I'm not used to, but it's very commonplace. And that's another an innovation that's kind of taken off through necessity and through safety protocols introduced through this new normal.
And something just came to my mind, and as kind of Craig was speaking about the disruption to different industry and how it impacts every industry differently. And I'm just thinking kind of at the fundamental level, disruption is about disruption to a business model, right? It's about disruption to a way of working. And then it's technology which then sort of helps to be able to enable either the disruption or to be able to react to a disruption in whether it's business or the way of working. And if I were to just think about way of working, indeed, like multiple organizations have been disrupted differently in the way they do business. However, the way they work have all been disrupted. So you think about every single company out there, whether they were already working from home or some company who probably never even given that a second thought, are forced with no choice to actually allow the employees to work from home and enable them with the right technology. So I think that's probably one of the most cross-cutting examples across all industries. Of course, with the exception of our frontline workers and other folks who actually have to be out there, which are unsung heroes. But for sort of most office style types of work, they all have fundamentally been disrupted, and a lot of that may pretty much remain in the post-COVID era as we see it.
Wow, tell me about it, hairdressers, right?
Yeah, there's a nuance that's lost through purely digital comms, and that is something that I do miss, and I don't know if there is a substitute for it, but social cues and human interaction is can't be understated.
Yeah, those digital haircuts are just not quite the same.
I would say that for who has the short hair or no hair, it's easier than who has long hairs. But
yeah, ask the guy wearing a cap on a on a podcast.
Well, that basically leads naturally to our next question. What are the benefits of the accelerated transformation and what we're talking already, our new ways of working? Yun.
I guess in terms of the benefits, I would say twofold. The first kind of benefit that really comes to mind is obviously the way we work, and I think a lot of the traditional myths around working from home and the inability to work from home has been now disproven, right? So it's very much commonly accepted method of working from home, and there's actually Harvard studies done as part of the whole the new age of working from anywhere, is that employees who work from home is actually been shown to be more productive, right? So there is actually statistical evidence to prove that there is benefit from working from home. And the second benefit I can think of is really around all the technology advances and all the innovation that has sort of been accelerated as a result of the isolation period, but now will still remain after the isolation period is over, and the consumers actually do get to benefit from these sort of more reimagined, reinvented, and evolved services and product offerings. And these product offerings that came about due to accelerated process, and some of these processes may very well be proven to stay as well within the organizations, and not only do the employees benefit, but now with this new modern sort of innovation process and cloud adoption and accelerated digital transformation, it will benefit the greater consumer community as well. So I do think, these are probably the two major benefits at a high level.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I think, the residual after all this blows over is more choice for the consumer. So, through disruption and a bit of pain, new routes to market have emerged, and in various industries, like I can think of healthcare for an example. I think I've visited the doctor physically less than I would in a normal year because I'm able to have a video, VC or phone screen session. It's cheaper, it's quicker, it's just more efficient. So, that industry, whilst disrupted, has got new routes to service the population. Yeah, another example is the education sector. Sector massively disrupted in Australia in particular. Massive reduction in international students. They've had to innovate, create new digital experiences for their students to keep students engaged for longer, reduce churn within the student population, and I think that's going to improve overall the offering that the education system can offer back to students. And that's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about the residual. These innovation spikes will remain in a lot of cases, like Yun said.
Yeah, and on that, even including for the elderly people, right? That some of them would have some reticence into use technology, but because they didn't have any other option, not all of them, of course, there are exceptions, but I can see even from overseas that they had to embrace and start using some of the technology, because otherwise they couldn't see, not much as their kids, but their grandkids. So they started also using more, embracing, and maybe now even after they are able to meet face to face, they continue to use that technology. So I think that's a good advance even for them in terms of experience. Of course, we can't expect them to know how to operate everything, but I think that in a way helps even their brain to evolve in certain aspects, because otherwise, I don't need to use that. So they want to avoid, right? Now they embraced, and okay, now you have used, continue using.
Yeah, and talking about how consumers benefited. Yeah, I think at the beginning it really took us a while to get used to the new ways of working, but in the end it's just so comfortable for everyone that we are just refusing to return to the old ways. So regarding my next question, I think we touched upon a few things, for example, working from home, but what do you think So what are the trends that are here to stay? Craig, please go first.
Yeah, I think one trend, if I relate this back to data and analytics and how important that is for organizations to adapt to changing market conditions. I think one trend that I'm anticipating certainly in the market is this idea or concept around fast data and the speed from which we can obtain insights from the point of ingestion, meaning how quickly can we acquire a data set and actually devise a strategy off the back of it or be confident with the insights we get from it. How do we reduce that time and how do we reduce that friction to be able to pivot more quickly? Is that through the adoption of real time and streaming technologies like Kafka and Kinesis, or is it the adoption of lakehouse architectures to be able to handle all the variety of shapes of data for every organization needs to handle? I think that's something that I think is going to be a necessity and on the forefront of a lot of CIOs' minds in the years to come. So how quickly can we get insight from data? How important is data to being able to adapt to market conditions, and how do we open our doors to be able to ingest not only our own data but third party and all the data that's out there that can assist us.
And Yun?
Yeah, so I guess we touched on a lot about working from home and the sort of the benefits to the employee of not having to sort of rock out in the office. But it actually has more profound impacts when we think about that, because the ability to work from home has now evolved to the ability to work from anywhere, which in turn means that as a population, we're no longer restricted to be congested towards the CBD, for example, where the offices are based, which means, and it's already happening, I'm kind of working with colleagues and they could be very well in a different state or in a different country. And the new normal is not just about working from home. It actually is indeed that WFA, right? Working from anywhere. And that will really sort of have long-term impacts on our roads and our environment around the congestions and the amount of commute that happens, because, and also around housing affordability, right? So there's economic impact to this as well, where families can now move further away from metropolitan areas in places where it's less congested, where they can enjoy higher quality of life and enjoy higher housing affordability, but yet still be working from a kind of very productive circumstances, and also getting relatively well compensated for based on the location where they have the job. So I do see that there is much more profound effects at a kind of economic level, and to the families who have been always thinking about, what if we make that sea change? What if we live somewhere else? Well, now they can, and to some extent it's already happening with a lot of families, and I think a lot of the changes in regulation I would expect around how we travel and how we commit, and we might even see sort of more small pockets of satellite cities forming around areas where people gravitate towards in the future. So there might not be a single CBD for a major city. There might be multiple. Yeah, I guess only time will tell. And kind of when Craig talked a lot about the data and that data that's being ingested, and the data leads to better customer experience, better digital channels, and all of these innovations that are data-driven, that are customer-driven, that are there to serve the customer. Well, once the customers sort of expect that and they come to take that for granted, then those channels and those services and those data-driven approaches will be here to stay. So companies who were not digital first, those digital channels, those chatbots, those websites, and acquisition channels they build, they will be there after the COVID, in the post-COVID era. The company who started building out a digital distribution channels, those channels will still be there because the customer will still continue to expect their goods to be delivered instead of physically visiting the storefront. So I do think as a result of, quite a lot of friction and pain, there are sort of very positive times ahead, and it's up to each one of us to continue to embrace the technology and the changes, and I guess adapt to this new normal, and also sort of urge the companies that we consume our product from to continuously innovate and sort of have our say on how they better serve the community and the customers.
Yeah, I certainly hope that working from Ellie Beach or the Whit Sundays remains a trend for the foreseeable future.
And I think I would add into that also some kind of a disruption to the talent acquisition teams, because we talk about the exodus happening, so people are leaving the big cities because now they can work almost from anywhere, as long as you have internet, right? So because of that, there's some people talking already in terms of for the companies to keep the talented people or to hire a talent person would be in the list. Okay, how can I work from anywhere, or how many times can I work from home? So if that doesn't fit into the person's what they want, basically they're not moving, they're not going to that company. So a lot of these companies will have also to revise their way of working in terms of hiring new people, because you still can see some advertisements, can work remotely, but it has to be based in Melbourne, for example, right? But with the end of the day, with this talent being scattered anywhere, they'll have to revise and rethink their process of hiring.
Yeah, I think that's translatable or transferable to other functions too. It comes down to individuals, and I know from a personal standpoint, my skill set, what I rely on is my ability to connect with other people, and I'm having to adapt and change the way I do that because my opportunity for casual interaction is reduced because everything's so formalized in 30-minute blocks. So personally, I have to change my style to be able to cater for that. And that's not just, from a hiring perspective, that could be from a sales perspective, it could be just from execution or operations perspective as well. So it's a good point.
And I think what Craig touches on there is the serendipity effect, right? The ability to crowd around the water coolers and have a bit of a chat, and then meet people that you don't normally meet, and say hi, and you introduce yourself and talk about the latest gossip and what's happening, and then be able to identify opportunities and act upon those, and make innovations happen, perhaps. And I think this is where I kind of equally as families sort of gravitate towards different areas and in a more distributed manner, the offers of the future in that hybrid working model where you can work from anywhere, but occasionally if you do want to visit the office, we might very well see the traditional sort of monolithic office becoming more distributed. So distributed as in satellite offices in satellite towns, as opposed to this one single office in the CBD, where if folks want to sort of get around the water cooler, they can visit their local satellite office and hang out with their fellow colleagues and have a drink and have a chat. So the working from home culture really extends beyond the individual employee, and I think it will impact how sort of townships are formed and how offices will distribute in the future.
Yeah, it's interesting how this distributed workforce can impact culture, and interesting to see how that plays out. Some organizations are well equipped and have the processes and mechanisms in place to be able to keep that glue together, but not all organizations are built the same way.
And I think that last point is just I think it sums up this whole conversation really, because at the end of the day, the digital transformation, sure, it's about overcoming challenges and riding the business model disruptions and about using tech to enable better services. But ultimately, digital transformation is about the people. Without the right people and the culture and the processes, then nothing will happen, right? At the end of the day, everything has to evolve around the people, and it's about how to enable the people to actually interact with other people to then bring the service and product to life, and very much obviously enabled by technology. So yeah, it's we have to always think about the people, whether it's our customers or our employees, and how to sort of give them the best that allows them to do what it is they want to do in the most frictionless way possible.
Yeah, that's for sure. We still have a lot to learn. Which brings me to what will be the tips you guys have for keeping up and winning in the next 1 to 5 years? Let's go with Yun.
Going forward and sort of what I would say for a lot of organizations in times of crisis, it's not just about surviving, it's about thriving, right? And in terms of tips, really a lot of the fundamentals I think that applied in the past still applies, right? But it is now at a more accelerated rate. So instead of jumping into various sort of implementations and technology ideas, think about what is the company's vision, what is the overall strategy. Having identified a particular vision, work backwards from there, working backwards from the vision, from the customer needs, into what does the business model look like? Because not necessarily all customer needs equate to business value, right? There may be needs that is not feasible or viable for organizations to fulfill. And it requires the right business model to be able to work out how to meet the customer's needs at a rate that is viable and is actually profitable for the business. With the right business model in place, then it's thinking about how can the organization organize itself in the form of an operating model to then take advantage of the organization resources and maximize the output to the customer. And then we can think about what sort of technologies and processes we need to implement to then be able to operate in a way that fulfills the business model that meets the strategic vision. So I think it's pretty much the basic model for transformation towards the target state of getting an enterprise to be continuously successful, continuously innovating. However, in the times of crisis such as these, and in the face of uncertainty in the future, these processes these components and building blocks have now been amplified to become more important. In terms of what if a company does it right, then the benefit will be more exponential. Whereas if the company do it wrong, well, the benefit will actually become exponentially negative. So yeah, that is very much sort of my tips for not only surviving but thriving in the times of crisis going forward.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, thinking about what I've learned in my journey so far, joining Amazon, they have a mission statement here to be Earth's most customer-centric company. And I think it's a great North Star. And like Yun said, if you work backwards from the customer need, you're always guided. You're guided in the right direction. I think another tip here, it's always day one, and having a day one philosophy and a day one culture keeps us vibrant and keeps us thinking, and keeps us reinventing. And reinventing is the third tip here. It's so critical to be able to adapt and have a culture that supports reinvention. And what comes with that is being able to fail, being supported through that process, to experiment and to learn through data. In a culture that embraces those things is super important to staying relevant and being able to adapt to disruption and change.
What is day one culture?
It's always day one at Amazon. There's this quote from Jeff Bezos. I think he was in a fireside chat or he was in some kind of interview, and someone asked him, He goes on about day one culture, and day one culture is this philosophy around, startup, always being day one, that energy that you have when you're trying something new. And he wants to harness that. It's always day one is a mantra that you hear a lot at Amazon. And someone's asked, what does day two look like? And he responded by saying, day two is stasis, followed by irrelevance, followed by excruciating, painful decline, followed by death. And that is why it's always day one. It's just a great quote.
So is there anything else you would like to add that we haven't covered today? Let's start with Yun this time.
Yeah, sure. I think it's been a very sort of interesting panel chat, and we talked about a lot of things. Craig talked about the customer-centric culture. We talked about disruption. We talked about business models, strategy, and how organizations have been overcoming the various challenges over the last year in a time of crisis. But I think lastly, it's important for us to be reminded that it is important for us all to be nice to ourselves. We are also humans. We are customers, right? So it is important to think about how we can help the organization, how we can help our fellow person. But it's also important to self-reflect and say, am I okay? And occasionally look to the side and say, are you okay? It's important for us to care for one another. And it's okay to feel anxious in such times of crisis, in such times of uncertainty, because human beings are actually the most anxious beings on the planet because of our ability to imagine a future of crisis or imagine a future of hope. But equally, what comes with anxiety is our ability to adapt and be resilient. And that is reflected in the organization culture and the innovation that's happening that we see over the last 12 months. Is the result of the human resiliency and the ingenuity and the adaptability that's really kind of shining through in organization's culture. So fear not. Be nice to yourself. Take care of one another. And as you feel anxious, thinking about the future, imagine a brighter future, a future of hope, and think about how, as an adaptive and resilient human that you are, how you can change the future to be from that future of crisis into that future of opportunity. So that would be my end note, is to think about ourselves.
Following on from that advice, you and I can proudly say that I've taken that advice up this year. Probably the most, I guess, personal change that I've made this year is investing in myself, and a result of doing that has made me more focused, less anxious, and to given me some extra skills to be able to handle situations. And it's a great point. I think we shouldn't lose sight of that. We need to look after ourselves. Healthy mind, healthy body, and be kind to each other. You can't fault any of that advice.
And I think to Craig's kind of point there, like when we kind of think about it, that it's very similar to how an organization survives, right? It's following the fundamentals, but at a more exponential and a more exaggerated level. When we think about being nice to ourselves, taking care of one another, those are fundamental truths as well. But in times of crisis, these truths and fundamentals actually become more exemplified. So it's actually now more so than ever, we have to take care of each other. We have to come together as one collective and sort of overcome the challenges that are being thrown our way.
Yeah, definitely. And into that, we keep saying reinvent for the companies, but we need to reinvent ourselves. Yes, because each one of us have different ways of coping, or styles, or personalities, etc. So there are people that are more introvert than others, or extrovert, whatever that might be, and there'll be different ways of coping with the same situation. But definitely that's a big lesson for us to say, okay, the way that we are used to won't work. I have to change. So see what happens. Try something. If it doesn't work, try something different. Talk to people, because at the end of the day, yes, health mind, health body. So if your mind is not there, it doesn't matter what you do physically, you may not reach that point, or to be as good as you could or as healthy as you would. But yeah, I think it's like some people would say, every New Year's they sit down and have a recap of the previous 12 months and set up some plan, etc. I think this is a much bigger thing, because not just for 1 year and fall into the cracks, because I don't see we are going back exactly how we were before. So it's a reinvention of ourselves constantly until we find what makes more sense for us.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Easy for us to get all profound in this topic, but some simple skills actually can be learned to help with this stuff. And listening to your body, and if you're tired, have a nap, 20 minutes, you'll come back from that little power nap more invigorated and ready to concentrate. A gratitude journal to keep note of all the positive things that's going on in your life, and breathing techniques and mindfulness. These are skills and habits, and they can be learned, and they're now part of my skill set that I didn't have before this pandemic hit.
And to put another technology spin on that, because I just can't resist, there are apps for mindfulness that Craig has suggested. So if you do not have a notebook and you have a phone, you can also download the mindfulness app, which is actually one of the apps I use to help me meditate.
Yeah, these are very important points. Turns out we ourselves are our most important customers, right? So we should take care of ourselves. We want to thank our guests for their time and for the insightful discussion. It's been a tough year, but reflecting on it actually made us realize there are quite a few things we can be grateful for. So here it is, the list of things that happened in the tech world during the first year of the pandemic. Accelerated digital transformation that resulted in organizations becoming technologically more mature at a faster pace. Innovation is critical in these times. Organizations have to keep reinventing themselves. So we discussed several examples of innovations that happened this year in industries such as the travel, retail industries, the education sector, and more. Flexible work conditions for employees, the work from anywhere model, the disruption of the traditional office model, sharper customer focus. It all comes down to catering for the customer and delivering value. We also heard a few tips on how to keep up and how to strive in the coming years. One way to adapt in such unpredictable circumstances is to apply data management best practices in the cloud. Don't forget to follow us on LinkedIn for regular updates on the podcast. Thanks for listening. Goodbye.